All right. Greetings to you all, and thank you for joining Identity Branding Forum and SP Jain today's webinar. I'm gonna have to mute you all because I'm hearing a lot of static on the background. Could you mute your mics, gentlemen? And then once we are ready, we will come back on. Thank you. Still can't hear me, I presume. Now, if any question, you can always questions and answers on the left-hand side. And there is also where you ask the questions and we provide you the answers. It's a Q&A. That's where you will find it on your left-hand side, the top label. Now, to get started, basically, thank you for joining us today. And I hope you all can hear me and see the shared screen for today's discussion. Now, I would like to invite you to grab your cup of coffee, sit back, enjoy what I believe to be a mind-invigorating discussion for today. And I hope you all are enjoying the long holidays that we are having right now. And hopefully everybody is safe as we go on. Now, this webinar will consist of the main subject presentation, which is the questions: Are we moving towards the crypto bartering and digital currencies economies? Then followed by a panel discussion, then a question and answers for all the audience. And I'm going to mute all of your mics until we are ready for the Q&A later on when we finish. You will find in your left-hand side the panel, the questions and answers labeled Q&A, like I mentioned earlier. And Identity Branding Forum is a global expert house. We simply build brands. This is just a little bit brief introduction on who we are. And we are about science and art. We brag ourselves to be a house of art and empowering brands with our science. We empower brands through engagement, diversity, and inclusion. Through our science and tools, we turn our clients' businesses to a people hallmark. We make you heroes. And basically, simply what you need to do is you can go to our website, www.identitybrandingforum.net, to read more of what we do and how perhaps we can help you. Now, I also like to introduce you to SP Jain School of Global Management. Now, SP Jain is, they've got branches in several countries around the world, in Dubai, in addition to Dubai, Sydney, Mumbai, and Singapore. They have been rated top 10 in the region, regionally as the regional schools, and top 95 in the world. And we're privileged to work together with them. Now, you can also check their website at www.spjain.ae to learn more a little bit what they do, basically. Now, the panelist that's going to be joining with us today is me to be the one that is going to be making the main presentation. I'm the group chairman and CEO of Identity Branding Forum. The next, our moderator, Professor Christopher Abraham, and he's the CEO of SP Jain, the Dubai campus, and I always see him as a dynamic leader to follow. And he doesn't know it, but he is one of my favorite mentors. He continuously gives me good ideas to think about. The next, also prior, now Orange in Egypt, and I consider him really intelligent mentor and a great mind to work with. The next one is Mr. Kyriakos Kafinas. He's the CEO of Action Coach. He's absolutely a brilliant mind to work with, and I'm glad of the relationship that I have with all three gentlemen that I just mentioned. Now, basically, this is a historic readings that I always rely on. I like to follow data tracks, bring them together, and connect them to the subject matter I'm focused on. And then develop strategic alternatives of what would link meaningfully to business, community, and people. What I will share with you is a small portion of the data I am currently working for on a new book I will be publishing soon. I will be sharing some of the references and points of focus to guide you to do your research, if you like, and draw your own conclusions that might be relevant to you and your business. Now, let us look at the wealthiest of the wealth of the wealthiest people in the world. Now, you're going to be you probably feel the pains, your blood pressure is rising when you're looking at all of these big numbers, the trillions, the trillionaires. You'll be astounded what you will see a little later, basically speaking. Now, in this slide here, we're looking at a report prepared by Credit Suisse in 2019, showing the global wealth is $360 trillion. Now, my calculator doesn't have enough space for all of those digits. 46.8 millionaires worldwide collectively own $158 trillion. Can you phantom the numbers? I'm not in that list. Now, here is something interesting. It is a ticker, what I think. China had more members than the United States in the top 10%. Now, this presents a major challenge to the largest economy in the world. You will see why in a minute. Now, more millionaires were added to the list in 2019. Over 1 million of them, according to the report, mostly in technology. You will discover why in a minute. Now, half of that is in the United States, 675,000 millionaire. Sadly, I am not in that list. I know that for a fact, for so far. Now, the alarming news what you're looking at, creates an inequality. Now, the bottom 90% accounts for 18% of the global wealth, according to the report. Narrowing down the focus on financial monopoly. While the richest 10% own 82% of global wealth, and the top 1% alone owns 45%. Now, gentlemen, ladies, whoever have access to that 1%, share the phone number, please. Now, let us add more perspective to the total wealth of the world. The top 15 banks. Now, I couldn't go through the whole list of banks all over the world to get the data, but I wanted to focus on a number that gives a significant relevant to the subject what we're talking about. The top 15 banks in the world have a grand total of $38 trillion. Only 4 of them are in the United States, and much of the grand total in the hands of the Chinese. Can you see the relevance to the current global economic challenge? Thanks to Donald Trump highlighting this out. Now, let's take a small example to get closer to what is going on in the world. Jordan is a small country. All of you knows, reached a total deposits in their bank, $50 billion almost, as of January 2020. Okay, this is according to a published report by CEIC data. Now, it's noting here, okay, national government debt in Jordan is at $42.6 billion as of January 2020. $50 billion total deposits in the banks, $42 billion in national debt. You draw your conclusions for a lot what's going on. That will create a relevance. Now, looking at the national debt, let's look at what's going on globally. as a global debt. The United States, the largest economy in the world, it took almost 20 to 24 years to hit the $24 trillion where it stands today. It started in 1996. It was at a $5 trillion. And as of April 7, 2020, it's at $24 trillion. Now look at here. It took 167 days only between September 30th, 2008 and March 16, 2009 to hit $1 trillion mark. This shows how fast the national debt of the United States is growing. Why this is important? Well, let's take something else that's more astonishing. This is the consumer debt that has approached, in addition, of course, to the national debt, that has approached $14 trillion. In the United States, I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about the rest of the world. As of 2019, and now this is according to the New York Federal Reserve. Home mortgages rose to $9.4 trillion, auto loans, $1.3 trillion, student loans, $1.5 almost $1 trillion, credit card loans, $1 trillion. Now, if this is not interesting enough, let's look at something else, what we call the global debt clock. Now, I want you to see here, I hope you can all see this. This is real time, by the way. This is how fast the United States government national debt is growing. Okay? China, Japan, Germany, UK, France, India, Italy, Brazil, Canada, Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Greece, Indonesia, Ireland, Korea, Mexico. Now I'm talking about in the trillions and the billions. All right, at Canada we stopped at the what we call the trillionaires club of debts. Here we are talking about the hundreds of thousands. Mexico, Nigeria, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Taiwan, Turkey. This is painful. I mean, when you start thinking of all of those big numbers, you come up and say, well, what does that all means together? Okay? This is what it means when I try to tally the total of those countries in that table alone, $72.295 trillion. Now, I didn't add a lot the extra change in the table. I just added the big numbers to give us where we are with it. $72 trillion national debts of the countries in that table. Now, what does that mean? Now, here where I came to a hard stop in my research. Significant numbers. Today, there is $37 trillion printed dollars in circulation worldwide. Now, if you don't think that's a big enough numbers, try to read this number. 1.2 quadrillion dollars. How many of you uses this term in a day, a week, a month, a year, or a lifetime? Well, it's a 1 by 50 followed by 15 0. I don't know if I'm going to see it in my lifetime, but I know this number exists today somewhere in cloud. Okay? These are the sources where the bottom where we obtain the data of it. Now, when we are talking about the global wealth, the debts, we see not enough cash to cover the trillions in the world. Trillions of wealth, trillions of debts anywhere in the world. Okay, just let me. Now, this creates a challenge, a big challenge. Okay, when you see not enough cash to cover. I didn't even talk about the other currencies around the world, but I'm just talking about the main currencies of trade that actually controls a lot of the indexes worldwide. All forms of cash will disappear by 2030. Now, this is a magical number being used by a lot of governments, a lot of companies, a lot of entities around the world. There is a secret behind the 2030 figures. All forms of cash, rest assured, all forms of cash instruments will disappear by 2030, if not sooner. We will no longer be carrying paper money. We are most probably will be witnessing the last days of the paper money era. Why I'm saying that? Ready for another surprise? You see this statement here? Decisions were made in 2015 to start this transformation. This is what I found of interest reading. In September 2015, all United Nations member states adopted the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, including their commitment, now listen carefully, to provide legal identity for all, including birth registration, by 2030. Now, where I found this information? Here. This is a website of what we call ID 2020. How many of you, ladies and gentlemen, have heard of ID 2020? I didn't until I started doing my research about 2 weeks ago. That led me to share with you this interesting conversation. Let's get back here to our slide. Now, what was more interesting is this. This is called ID 2020 Alliance. Now, some of you might have heard of it, but I am sure most of us did not. I am one of the most of us that did not hear of it until recently. Okay? Now, ID 2020 is the vehicle that was put in place to get us wired and transform us to digital currencies controlled. Their value proposition of the alliance is that an approach that is holistic, market-based, and addresses the full scope and scale of the challenge. No government, company, or agency can solve this challenge alone. Setting the future course of digital ID and navigating the associated risks is a challenge that requires sustained collaboration and global partnership. This is what I found here. We need to get digital ID right. Why it is important? This is what actually they also say. For over a billion individuals worldwide, accessing basic goods and services is difficult, if not impossible, due to a lack of recognized identification. So everything is, to them, is relevant to the identification, digital coding. Okay, so call it whatever you want to, but it's a digital identity. To them, we lack recognized identification, so we have to do something, and they're doing something about it. With good digital identity, individuals could use credentials. And listen carefully to what I'm saying, please. Individuals could use credentials issued from a variety of different institutions in order to gain access to a variety of different services while preserving privacy and security and maintaining control over their information. Is that something you would like to hear, or is this something would scare you? Now, who is the ID 2020 Alliance? Who are they? It's good to find out. These are the partners. Now, if you don't know, Accenture. Now, this one is really unique, Gavi. Have anybody heard of Gavi? It's the Vaccine Alliance. Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, brings together public and private sectors with the shared goal of creating equal access to new and underused vaccines for children living in the world's poorest countries. Dr. Seth Berkley, CEO of Gavi, the vaccine, sits on our executive board. The Rockefeller Foundation, unique. Microsoft, who hasn't heard of Microsoft? But you probably didn't expect it to be here, nor would you expect the Rockefeller Foundation associated with this, nor would you expect the Vaccine Alliance associated with this. And then we have IDEO.org. General partners, Mercy Corps. Wow. These are what we call humanitarian agencies. Kiva, Lions Care, iRespond, Simprance, ICC, International Computing Center, Berkeley University, the Science of Improved Lives, and etc. This is an amazing statement that I read of the Executive Vice President of Microsoft. Closing the identity gap is an enormous challenge. It will take the work of many committed people and organizations coming together across different geographic sectors and technologies. But it is exciting to imagine a world where safe and secure digital identities are possible, providing everyone with an essential building block to every right and opportunity they deserve. I hate the world when somebody tells me democracies. These are cover-ups, titles, labels, to elusive, more control lead. Now, this is more interesting about an article of a summit that they actually created. Blockchain, Digital Identity Alliance, ID 2020. They launched their pilot. This is more interesting. They're promoting under the pretext of get-rich-quick scheme, solving government's national debts, covering much-needed capital investments with a premium focus on healthcare, UN agencies behind supporting it. Blockchain, ID 2020, interesting relationship. Healthcare, interesting relationship. We'll see why. Now, before the coronavirus started, okay, let's try to bring things to perspective. To bring all what we have been discussing in the earlier slides into relevant context of what has been going on before the coronavirus crisis started. Let's look at some of the things that have been making headways into our lives without us knowing why and understanding relevance. And here is what is puzzling me the most. We have been embracing technological advancements without having strategies to make them relevant for our business and communities to grow. We have been overly excited with the new gadgets that are taking us all to the wizard land of Oz. I am sure most of you have heard Wizard Land of Oz. Artificial intelligence, cognitive technology, cryptocurrencies, nanotechnologies, quantum computing, microchips, 3D printing, DNA and genetic engineering, 5G, and etc. And I'm sure Mr. Osman could share a lot more of technologies that would relevance to get us all wired into to bring us into perspective of ID 2020 Alliance. Now, this is what I like to call the Corona aftermath. Is the required finale to bring all of this to a close. Now, I am not here debating who is behind it, behind the disease. I don't care. This is not important. It's there. It's happening. It's dangerous. The propaganda, perhaps, it's over publicized. I'm here to address how it is being taken advantage of and where it is expected to take us all on a global scale. Stop for a minute and think within the perspective of ID 2020, the astronomical wealth and debts that doesn't have even enough currencies in the world to cover it, where are we going? We're already started hearing more in terms of pushing us towards bank cards, wallets, microchips, mobile wallets, cryptocurrencies. This is what I call risky futures currencies. Now, here what I call safe future currencies. That is also going to be rising quickly with the disappearance of cash and credit. Bartering has precious metals like your gold, your uraniums, and the likes, etc. Bartering has been historically safe solution to solving economic problems when cash disappears. Greece in recent times have resorted to this to help its economy. Here we can witness the birth of an economic system that would move on its own safe economic growth. Now here what I think some of the countries that will follow this path, like Asian countries, Muslim countries, Russian and China bloc, for example, these will be moving towards that alliance, while the earlier ones, you will see more of the US, Europe, Western European countries in that line. And we'll discuss that in a second. I can see also there is an expected leveraging between the two systems, between the risky and the safe investment, what we have. This is going to be especially in the countries that are agriculturally and rich, and also rich with minerals, with mining, because they have capabilities to offset the risks where they try to minimize the ID 2020 Alliance monopoly into the directions where they would be safer to sustain their economic growth. Now, this is what I'm expecting to see to happen once this coronavirus crisis is over with. And these are the samples of what I'm reading. Merger of large businesses, going to be seeing that happening. Merger of financial institutions, investment houses, venture capitals, and community funds. Funding, merger or expansion of a small financial institution with businesses and commodity houses, increase of social and labor inequalities in urban areas, migration of small and medium businesses from urban areas to rural areas, increased focus on agricultural trading, bartering commodities, going back to the extended family era prior to the Industrial Revolution, increased focus on precious metals investment bartering. These are some of the key changes that we're going to start seeing, and pretty quick. Now, I like to also here provide a sample of suggestions that I think we need to consider. I'm not saying this is the perfect solution, ideal suggestions, but it's a guideline to guide you where the path to think. Now, look at including in your investment portfolio of at least 30% investment in precious metals and 20% in traded commodities. Look at strategic mergers to sustain business presence. Look at strategic collaborations to sustain supply chain. Look at strategic engagement with local communities to sustain market presence. Look at creating business affiliation to build and sustain your business ecosystem, like economic clubs, for example, that you would create for your own business. Now remember, whatever you decide to do, keep in mind that engagement, diversity, and inclusion is the future of your business. Make that the essence of your strategic survival. This is the only way you're going to be able to have your business make it through the coronavirus tough times and after, when the cash disappears and everything turns to digital world controlled. Now I would like to hand the floor to our distinguished panels to share their thoughts and views of what was presented to you, or any other ideas that they may have. Then we will follow with the questions and answers for you. Professor Christopher Abraham, Mr. Osman Sultan, Mr. Kyriakos, you can unmute your mics so you can share your views. Dr. Christopher, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abed. I think it was an eye-opener for a lot of us, at least me, in the sense that we are in very interesting historical times. Whether it's going to pan out for the better or for worse is something that we'll have to wait and watch. But this is historic. We're actually being part of history. And in this context, we are seeing the huge impact and influence of the global monetary system and would be the future because of this tremendous impact of this invisible enemy called the coronavirus on global economies. I would also say it's historical because nowhere in the past have we had a scenario where almost the entire world has been brought to a standstill. 200 plus countries and still counting. Each one of them have their own bag of woes and troubles. And the ones that were supposed to be the superpowers, ironically and unfortunately, seem to be bearing the brunt, which probably makes coronavirus the greatest leveler historically. So it's no respecter of people. It's no respecter of status, titles. You could be the prime minister, you could be the princess, you could be from the royal household, it doesn't matter. Having said that, what Dr. Abed's presentation showed us is a pathway. Now, will that pathway be the golden pathway filled with enlightened opportunities? Or would it be another phenomena which would create more challenges than opportunities? That's for the experts to decide. So I would like to welcome Mr. Osman and Mr. Kyriakos. So from your perspective, we are moving towards a new system. I was a little scared when he spoke about ID 2020. I wasn't too convinced that that's the system forward, but that probably is my personal fear. But I would like to hear the opinions of two stalwarts from the industry as to where do they see the future. We know it's uncertain, we know it's ambiguous, but where do they see the future in the context of these dramatic changes taking place all around us? Mr. Osman, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Professor Abraham. And I would start with a disclaimer to the question, where do we see the future? I think we need to be very humble and trying to draw some orientations. If this crisis showed us something, it's the confirmation of what we have been seeing, that in various places where actually the unthinkable in common sense actually was happening. That in itself, if I look at this part of the world, when the so-called Arab Spring, which I do not consider a spring, but that's a different debate, happened, everybody said, but who could have imagined that something like that happening? Recently, in the uprising that happened in Lebanon, people said, but nobody would have imagined that this. And here, technology, and mainly the ways that people have to communicate, I'm referring to social media, helped a lot in what I call the propagation phenomena. So this is where actually technology is allowing things to happen at a different pace, thus different scale. That's one. Now, I've been seeing the presentation that Dr. Abed kindly made for the first time. There are a lot of points that I would challenge, so and not endorse. But if we take the headlines, it is clear. The first part of the presentation is showing that the all economy modus operandi that the world has been moving into was generator of more inequalities. That was something we know. I mean, in my youth, in my teenager time, we were very passionate and excited about the discussion between socialism and capitalism. This was the era of the Cold War, and the discussion was about the virtue of one or the other of the systems. And obviously, the so-called capitalism, private initiative, let the individuals do prevailed. Historically, we saw that becoming more and more like this is the. What I agree with what Dr. Abed mentioned is that this was hidden behind a lot of words, buzzwords that were used. The word democracy being one of them, because the definition or the reading of democracy was really varies, and modern history is showing us that that word was used actually to justify a lot of expansions and a lot of inequalities created and people put in precarious situations. So even though recently in the last years we have seen that a lot were saying that for capitalism to survive, it will need to reinvent itself. It will need a more ethical capitalism. We started to see this after the 2007, when we realized that the value that was created, if I assume, for instance, that in a market like the USA, in a country like the USA, the value of the companies in the stock market is a good proxy for value created, although this itself contains a little bit of a speculation logic. If this value was 1, the value of financial instruments at the time where this crisis happened in 2007, financial instruments between the banks that do not correspond to any value creation, real value creation, was 4. So 4 times more than the real value. So this system where value was in an inflated manner, created totally artificially, has a problem of sustainability. Now, did we learn the lesson of that? I don't think so. We haven't seen, although yes, there were a little bit, but we haven't seen anything that came and said the banking systems, and Dr. Abed here, I agree with you on what you showed us, and the concentration of part of the economy, of the value that the world is created in the hands of banks, and the control of this in the hands of banks, financial institutions. So that's one headline that I would like. The link between real value and the value as we see it, or the face value. Now, a thought on coronavirus on that first headline. Billions, maybe hundreds of billions today are a fact, in my opinion, that we are consuming what we need. For most of us, actually, we are consuming the basic that we need, right? Food, health, more health, because probably societies have been a little bit passing under this, the old economy, making cuts on health systems, etc. And now they are put under test. And we saw that a lot of countries failed actually in this test, because we are having tens of thousands of dead people. So we are consuming what we need as opposed to, so there is a tremendous value that has been created in inducing needs, inducing consumption habits, etc. So that is something that the post aftermath, to use the word of Dr. Abed, will tell us how the world will move. So that was my first headline in the economy versus now back to the second point, where the story was on the technology. And we have seen, and that would be my second headline. I have 3 of these. We have seen recently a lot of buzzwords. Dr. Abed in a slide very rightly put some of that, where everything will be connected with everything. I will add the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Everything, where not only we are connected with each other, but everything we touch in our daily lives, from the fridge to the light bulb, to the red light signal, to our car, or things embedded in our body, microchips embedded in our bodies. All of this will be communicating and transmitting data. That abundance created specifically among the young people, and I have among the youth, and I have a great deal of esteem and respect for these young people, because what we are seeing all over is that, and probably because they live in a world of abundance, they are demanding when it comes to certain values, to certain standards. They are more sensitive to the environment. They want a more ethical world. Which will have a lot of consequence, hopefully, in that after crisis scene. So there has been confusion by all this technology. And if you noticed, a lot of accusing, pointing fingers have been directed towards 5G as a potential reason. We have seen, I don't know if all of us, or all of you, ladies and gentlemen, have heard, but a lot of things happened and saying this is the 5G in the UK, or is it Ireland? There have been people burning some of the 5G towers, and a lot of videos circulated on social media. So this is a reaction of defense. You know, we have learned in anthropology, in sociology, even in economy, that this is always a cursor. Groups, communities, societies, populations balance between fear and greed. You know, and finance and stock markets, you see a phenomenon of fear that immediately triggers, disrupt the base, and you see a lot of people. And then there is greed because people for some reason believe, and that generates. If a population is under very severe natural storms, you know, primitive societies, the main concern is to find a way, a shelter. When me as a teenager, we were living in the middle of a civil war, I saw, you know, all the ambitions or plans that my father had. Everything disappeared, and it was mainly ensuring the safety, the physical safety of the family, and finding a roof that is not too exposed. Then when the situation is fine, even from a health point of view, when something happens to us, we are in a fear mode. Now, when we are back to health, we forgot all the good resolutions that, yes, from now on, I need to have a healthy life, etc. And that's always between the fear and the desire of doing more. Greed is just a metaphor used, but it's basically, no, I want to do more, I want more pleasure, I want less constraints, etc. So the world after Corona, the economy after Corona, will it be an economy that, I don't want to say will correct, because that will not correct automatically, but will they be the right platforms for the conversations that are needed? Something like 5G, something like the Internet of Things, something like artificial intelligence, something like big data, and all what we see and the tremendous capabilities of data cannot happen and be for the good of individuals, societies, for the well-being, if there are not conversations raising the concerns, bringing all the stakes around. Will the Corona crisis, where the world just was, as Professor Abraham mentioned, started to work as one, started to look with compassion to what's happening, because independent of social class, independent of borders, independent of religions, independent of any things that were used for a logic of clanic belonging, used for fueling the logic of clanic belonging, in order to get in a logic of a development of human kind and human condition. Will the world go there? It will not go by itself, but if the right people put in place these platforms for the right conversations, I am hopeful that this will happen. We are seeing a lot of videos. Now, again, that might be the result of people feeling fragile and experiencing fear, wanting a better world, saying the world will heal itself, saying, so will this be followed by some execution and some platform for having these conversations? That's a question mark. Far from me to speculate on that. As I said, we need to be very humble in our forecasting of what could happen, even when is this aftermath. So that's my second headline, the link with technology. And by the way, all these buzzwords on that point, on the technology point, these are not complicated. Actually, they all work together in one one model, if you want. Everything around us will be sensing. Everything then will be connected, and then we're trying to make everything smart. The purpose of this entire model needs to be the subject of real conversations. My third point, back to the headline on the what kind of economy, bartering or digital currencies. Now, what we have seen, but that's a speculation logic, is that all the stocks, including all the digital currency stock, have experienced a downtrend, serious downtrend. Bitcoin, the Tether, I think this the name, and others. Some of them linked to the US dollars, other, etc., have seen this. But what seems, without taking risk in any speculation, what I believe is that the world will need, because that world will be more and more connected. I believe that story of the pandemic we are living now will not be a one-time on-off switch. So it will finish and we will not hear about, and it will be some time. That risk is there. Bill Gates in 2015, Barack Obama in 2016 mentioned, we're seeing these videos, that there need to be, so I believe that the infrastructures that we're seeing around us will be different. That will be, we will all have, as individuals, families, companies, nations, plans. So when we press the button, we are entering a social distancing mode. Things will be put in place. Like in military, and the analogy was made by Bill Gates, by the readiness for military crisis and the readiness for pandemic crisis, the non-existent existence readiness for pandemic crisis. We will push a button, and a school will say, starting tomorrow, we are entering a home learning phase. Companies will say, okay, we are moving to the mode where some will work in shifts. We are moving into the social distancing for a certain period, because the country will say, we are entering in mode A, like in the films, in the US, DEFCON 1, DEFCON 2, depending on the level of urgency. So we are back to normal. It happens today when there is pollution. In some countries, when there is pollution, only certain cars can circulate, or no cars, only public transportation. You are not allowed to drive more than a certain speed on the highways, etc., etc. You have a battery of measures that are taken depending on the. So that will happen, in my opinion, which means that the world will learn at the level of individuals and families, at the level of corporations, schools and universities, nations, transportation, airlines. We will learn how to be in a mode more or less in various scenarios. And that, as a consequence, back to our subject, that the need for a virtual, global, secure, and cheap to use currency will be increasing significantly, in my opinion.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Osman. Thank you very much. And if I may take some of those key factors, we are looking towards an utopian system, a system where there could be more equality, where there could be a lot of collaboration, a lot of cooperation. My question to Mr. Kriakos, from a human perspective, let's be practical. I mean, this is fascinating if we can all come together. We are seeing that happen. Russia sending medical supplies and essentials to US, China sending something similar. So past enemies are becoming friends. Now the question is, can this friendship, can this collaboration be sustained? And I want to put another spanner in the works. On one hand, to each person, to each community, in fact, when Mr. Osman said, he used a very powerful word called clan. We are tribal, we are clans, right? So to each clan, to each identity of a country, of a region, of a particular community, would that come in the way of this glorious collaboration that we are talking about, this opportunity to cooperate, this opportunity to collaborate versus the individual instincts? Now, I'll again throw the third dimension, then I'll request Mr. Kyriakos to answer, is the political dimension. We all are political animals. We want power. Politics is driven by power. Power is driven by territory. Power is driven by authority. Power is driven by control. So who controls what, right? So would there be a genuine, or is there really a scope for an egalitarian system where everybody looks after? I mean, that would be the most ideal scenario, and I wish and pray that all of us think on those terms. But is that practical is the question. And I would like Mr. Kyriakos to share his profound thoughts on that, on these insights. Collaboration versus competition, politics, control, individual clans, tribes, communities, countries versus a global alliance. Yes, sir. Your thoughts, Mr. Kyriakos.
Kyriakos?
Thank you, Professor Hammer. I think what we live right now, what they call it the black swan, the unprecedented really crisis with a global impact, I would rather call it like an apocalypse now, actually. Because really what we're living the last, I would say the last 4 months, but mostly the last 2 months, is that we have become basically participants in a global, actually huge mission right now to go through this pandemic, which brought us so much all closely, like nothing before. Maybe because I was not alive during the Second World War, maybe that was the previous time, but I cannot remember, I mean, and even that time, there were no media as well at that time, that we felt the same way, being so close to our Italian ex-colleagues, to our Russian friends, to our friends, to our parents who live now in the UK. So we live actually the same time around the clock now, like never before. And this is what I believe is maybe it's the last milestone of knowing what we don't know. So basically knowing what is happening in the world that we thought we knew, but now we know exactly what is happening everywhere. So there's no more silos. There's no more hidden information. That's a feeling actually, and that creates a new mindset to the people to feel that we live the same. We are there's a huge inclusion actually to that one. We are all exposed actually to similar information and to similar options like we never felt before right now. And this inclusions helps a lot actually feeling close to each other. And of course, media have also played a role, I have to admit, because the information is traveling real time everywhere. So yes, to your first point, this is something that we never felt before. And this is something, of course, which is now, in a way, I would say, is programming the way we feel, the way we live our life, the way we even work right now. Because we can work now more than ever before, actually, on a global platform as well. And I know companies that they became more international because of the current situation, which is really amazing. So I think this is really one of the huge discoveries, apocalypses, which was there actually, but now we are all living in the same global world. I think the next point is with the clowns and how this is going to work. I think everybody right now tries to find out actually who who we are. I mean, what is important for our life. I mean, it is really going back actually to the purpose, actually, what really matters for us right now. And when we go back to this purpose journey, we will find also again that we have a lot of things in common, actually. And this will help us actually to start having more alliances, both on life things, but also on professional things. And this is very interesting because purpose unites people, unites interest as well. And this can be really another apocalypse because it's on a global plateau now. It's not anymore a regional or a local finding. I would also say that regarding the political role, there's definitely a lack of leadership. We all know, we all discussed that there's no central coordination actually of the pandemic right now. We see very obvious examples of countries who have managed to have some central coordination, how differently they are doing right now versus other countries. I can talk about even my country, Greece, which is not so famous of being very disciplined as a country. However, because of having a very disciplined new governor actually right now, we have one of the best lowest evolution actually of the pandemic in this country, which shows exactly how much the central handling can help. However, my intake actually is that we are moving more to a decentralization in terms of power exercise right now, and this is not only because of what we are living right now, but it's also because of the economic environment, which I believe is more ready than ever to start allowing to decentralize actually the way the economy and also the way the monetary system is using right now the different currencies. And to answer also the question of this webinar about bartering and digital economy, we all know that digital currency is here the last 12 years. It was first invented in 2008 when Bitcoin was launched. So it's already 12 years, which is, you know, one of the epitomes, of course, of the decentralization of the economy and of money exchange. But what we are living right now, it will be really a great opportunity, and we see that already happening with the central banks. I mean, like the European Central Bank, which for the first time said that we should consider also digital currency, which was never ever before said by the previous governors of the European Central Bank. So I believe centralization and digital currency is now more than ever before in discussion, and this is the opportunity actually to be able to move to a more decentralized economy. Thank you.
Decentralization. This is Abid Baides. Decentralization. I don't think I would agree with that. I think we're moving more towards centralization. Actually, captive controlled of a system with all what's going on right now. So that's just a quick input here on my side. Back to you, Professor Abraham. Dr. Abraham.
We are not, maybe you are mute.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So decentralization, again, is a very exciting term. We wish we have that. What we call the power of agency, that everybody takes responsibility for their own actions. Now, here's the contradiction, okay? Will too much of freedom be misused? Will decentralization itself become more than an opportunity, a challenge? Because then how do we control? Then comes the role of regulators. Do we need regulators at all in the future? And I want to, put some more perspectives and maybe take 5 to 7 minutes of thoughts from both of you. Go back in time, go back in history. When we were tribes, we had our own things going on. But 5,000 to 6,000 years back, the Phoenicians, the people from ancient Babylon, these people already started bartering. So they exchanged value. And that's been a good system. And some of us would be familiar with the monetary system that evolved. Now, the original monetary system, many of you will know, was based on a gold standard, and where you had currency pegged to gold. And then something, I don't want to get into the politics of it, it's a very controversial area. Of course, there were vested interests from some nations who wanted to challenge the existing system, and then brought in a system where governments can print money as much as they want. Now, that's a whole new can of worms, and I don't want to get into it. But having said that, so these challenges of decentralization versus regulation, bartering versus currency or monetary system, not pegged to anything, which means you print, inflation, deflation, stagflation, all these are challenges. So under that context, will the birth or will the evolution, because as Mr. Kriakos rightly said, it was born 12 years back. It's just that it's taken time to evolve. Can the future of digital currency be the answer that levels all of this? Because some of us who are familiar with blockchain know that it can be foolproof, that it can be controlled, that it becomes independent, and that every transaction can be monitored. So that makes it a little more, let's say, credible. So if you put it in place. My big worry, and I want both of you esteemed panelists to answer this, will we be able to come together as a global community to actually bring this across? Which means what we need is political will. And political will mean that I'm willing to lose some of my control for the larger interests of humanity, which was beautifully touched upon by the word called purpose, the meaning of life. Can we do that? Rather than I live for myself, that I live for a larger community. And can that be a global, just like the pandemic becoming global, can we have scenarios where that, we can do this? So this is the big challenge. And I want both of you to take about 5 to 7 minutes because we'll have to wrap up by 3:30. So if Mr. Osman, you can spend the next 5 minutes telling us what your thoughts are on this, and then I'll go back to Mr. Kriakos.
I'll try to be brief. I would love, Professor Abraham, I would love to adhere to what you're saying. But history showed us that in times of fear, now the world lives, the tendency to collaborate and to be ready for some compromises is a little bit more. But today with the pandemic, we can see that even during fear time, because probably still people believe that the impact is not still manageable, there is this competition that is prevailing. We all know that the China-US competition to control the world economy is there, or maybe this is as portrayed by the US and the fear of the US to lose their own. I believe actually that what moves us from the bartering system that is the most natural is central bank.
Mr. Osman, could you adjust your mic, please, because there is a static.
Yes, is it me?
One of you gentlemen, could you close your mics so the static goes away?
Okay. So,
okay, perfect.
Central banks, we know that the debt, is one instrument for the post-colonialist period. Instead of going and controlling directly by sending armies, etc., when you control the economy and when you control the debt of a country, you have a way. This is one format of neo-colonialism. So this is part as well of the global system of greed. So I wish I could be as idealistic. I'm optimistic with the youth. I'm optimistic that there will be more and more people that would see and will say, no, we need to come back to a little bit more of collaboration. We need to take care. Otherwise, the system in itself is built so that the wealthiest will generate more wealth. And yes, they will cascade part of this wealth. But in my opinion, this is not enough. We need to learn a different economic system. And my hope is that the post-pandemic part will teach us a little bit of that. But again, I don't know. This is yet to be seen.
Mr. Osman, Mr. Kriakos?
Yes, well, I also agree with Mr. Osman that that we can be optimistic, but we are not sure that during such a crisis, such a major change can happen, when usually during crisis we are becoming more centralized. I agree, and that's why also we see bartering, for example, during crisis, like during the crisis of 1920 or after the Second World War, where the periods actually when bartering was also growing. And we have also now bartering. I mean, as you said also, actually as Dr. Abed said, also in Greece, that has been in 10 years crisis, there was a growth of bartering because of the crisis situation. Now, regarding the digital currency, I think that there are, of course, as we all know, technical and economic reasons which are not yet solved, which have to do basically with the safety, have to do with the monetary policies, have to do with exchange rate. So there is still a lot of work which can be done because it's more technical, but definitely it requires a global will. It requires the central body's actually decision, which can be taken if this is the right time and the right actually environment to be taken. So I'm also optimistic that things will move faster than the last 12 years, because 12 years is a lot for the new digital currency. Actually, I think we have more than 5,000 different now cryptocurrencies, which represent around more than $200 billion right now. So there is a way already done, but I believe after crisis, not during the crisis, there will be more to discuss about this option.
Thank you. Okay, so we have another 10 to 15 minutes.
Actually, I extended the time until 4 o'clock. So
okay.
So we have that luxury of time.
All right. Okay.
Unfortunately, I will have to end. Apologies, gentlemen. Apologies to the audience. I scheduled it at 3:30, so hopefully you will pardon me if I stop at 3:30.
Yeah. So I think we'll wind up by 3:30. Should be we'll respect others' timings also. I have another session after this, so I would also be excused. So 3:30 should be the right thing.
Yes.
My next question is kind of controversial, and I'll tell you why.
Professor Abraham,
Yes,
Professor Abraham, would you, as a moderator, would you? There is a gentleman who put a lot of comments or questions. So in order not to run out of time, could we give some attention?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think that's a very good idea. So let's do that. Okay. In fact, part of my question was part of these questions. So a gentleman called Adile has asked, gentleman or lady, okay, aren't the wealthy ones lending the others, creating more wealth to them and control over the non-wealthy assets? That was one of my questions. And I felt that, yes, we should not have that kind of a system, but have a more distributed system. And the next question is, I think that the global economy was overinflated and this epidemic just blew the balloon. Very true, which is related to the quarter-on-quarter profits on stock markets, which is the real value versus the inflated value. Thank you very much. And we would like both our panelists to answer this question. There's another interesting question linked to it, which is, what is the view on the possibility of the collapse of the United States dollar? So maybe the panelists can take these questions.
Honestly, I do not have an answer. I am not a specialist, and I would not, as much as I touched on the other comments of Mr. Imad, and I think these are quite accurate comments. On that, I would reserve. I do not have an answer. I'm not an expert. I'm not an economist. And I do not have substantiated answer on that.
Okay. What about Mr. Kriakos? Would you like to answer? Mr. Kriakos?
Yes, actually, I'm a businessman as well, but I think I can take the question about the wealthy ones lending the others, creating more wealth to them and control over the non-wealthy assets. I think we definitely see right now all the wealthy individuals start playing a more active role, actually, and not active role as opinion leaders and public figures, but basically investing actually for the universe and for the whole population, which has not been seen on a demand case like this one. It was more decided in a CSR or their own actually philanthropic activities. I think this is something that is really very interesting, and I believe also that I even see at a business level that a lot of businesses, due to the digitalization, are also have decided also in the future, and that's what I'm listening right now, to take care also not only of their customers, but also care also of less wealthy, let's say, stakeholders they perceive in their perimeter right now. So I think this is a new mindset that this will evolve during the crisis, and this is of course very, very human, very, very ethical, and very interesting. If this really is also well communicated, and it is actually, because the media are communicating this well.
Yeah, but I would like to balance this by something that would bring us back to the question of Mr. Imad on monopolies concentrating. If we look at what's happening in the global digital space, we can see that 4 companies, let's say if we exclude the Microsoft, which is a little bit older in the digital space, are concentrating more and more the value in ecosystem. What is happening in wealth creation used to happen in the industrial or on the human level is happening in an ecosystem, in the digital ecosystem. If we look in the US, the GAFA, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, and now you can add Microsoft. So there is this concentration. Touch on a remark that he made.
Could you adjust your microphone, Mr. Osman?
My microphone is on because I'm speaking. So, yeah. So what I'm saying on that as well is it will be interesting to see, because a lot of businesses are, if not all businesses, are not going to business as it was. There is a new way. They discovered what we have been saying in conferences, that digital transformation can be a source of efficiency. They discovered it forced, not by design or willingness, but because they were forced. And I had a CEO in a conference call recently saying, we are seeing that we can be much more efficient. That will have some consequences on the labor market, on employment market. Hopefully, these are one of the conversations that the world needs to have. You cannot leave millions, tens of millions in precarity and in unemployment. That is one test to see if this world is going to do the right thing. And that will have a consequence on the concentration of money spent more on the digital things. As I said, ecosystems that are dominated by few players rather than more players.
Interesting. Now, there's another question, which is a gentleman called Dr. Mustafa. how and what can we learn from the barter system to paper currency compared to the current movement from paper to digital currency? So in other words, his question would be the pros and cons between paper versus barter versus digital. Anybody can take the question. Maybe Mr. Osman or Mr. Kriakos.
First, if on a light way, some of us are washing these days the paper currency. When we receive money, we put them and we wash them, being afraid of. I know that my sister is doing this. So digital currency, don't need to wash it and put it in antiseptic. So that's the first difference. No, but on a serious note, Dr. Mustafa, and the question is extremely accurate. Yes, of course, the more you will move to a world that is organized around digital, from physical to digital, you will need, while you are on this digital space, to use digital currencies or other ways. I mean, how many things we are ordering now online, and what we will need is a way to order. Now, that way will be a digital currency that we pay. And we will be doing this more and more. Companies will be doing this more and more. People will be interacting with each other on, as I said, more and more on digital. So that shift will go along from physical to digital, and the things we do will go along from paper currency to digital currency, for sure.
Interesting. Now, final few thoughts. And, we have about 5 to 6 minutes. We spoke about capitalism versus socialism. So is there a better system? But now millions of people are going to go unemployed. How are governments going to take care? Will the current capitalistic system address their challenges? One is, okay, can we give all of them jobs? If we can't give them jobs, can we look at something called the universal basic income? And if it's a universal basic income, what will be the monetary currency that will come across to use or, to help them? The second thing is, if capitalism has to exist, I'm linking it with that Mr. Kriakos said, can we have something called conscious capitalism? So what is conscious capitalism? Providing value to all stakeholders, which includes all aspects of society, your suppliers, your distributors, your investors, employees, and the customers. Could there be a system that works? There are many companies that do that, what we call firms of endearment. So is that a route forward? So quick thoughts. We have 4 or 5 minutes. So quick thoughts from both Mr. Osman and Mr. Kriakos. One is the unemployment challenge and how do we take care of their needs? Second is the future ready for conscious capitalism?
I'll take the one on the universal. I'll take the one on the universal wage. That's a concept that I heard myself, Mr. Elon Musk. I heard people like Bill Gates mentioning this concept. Yes, it is a kind of band-aid when we deal with the basic needs that these people need to have a roof, to have. But at some point, sustainability, because the purpose of working is not only, or should not be only, just to have a roof and survive. There need to be a sense of purpose. There need to be a sense of, I'm doing something. So that is not a complete solution, but if that is necessary as a first step, yes, for sure. But with the limitations that I mentioned. I'll take on that.
Mr. Kriakos?
I'll leave Dr.
Mr. Kriakos, would you like to take the conscious capitalism? Would that be the route forward?
Kriakos?
Hello. Mr. Kriakos?
Yes, conscious capitalism is where we would like our current capitalism to evolve, for sure.
Absolutely.
And this is really where we expect also the opinion leaders and actually all the society actually and the community to help us going there. And we need to give the example actually also not only to the affluent people, but also to the whole academic system, how to educate the new generation to be really conscious about the community and how they should build their own future, to become conscious citizens and conscious entrepreneurs. And I would like to add one more thing. In order to become a conscious capitalist, you need to become a conscious, to have an entrepreneurial mindset. And this is actually where I see also in this crisis a big opportunity. The government is not only paying more subsidization and salaries actually to the people who will go out of the work, but re-educating them how to become, have a different mindset, to become more entrepreneurial in the new opportunities that will arrive after the crisis. And this is actually very, very important as well.
Super. Thank you very much. On that beautiful note, I just want to say that this works. The system that was just proposed, which is conscious capitalism, conscious entrepreneurship, really works because there's a tremendous amount of research. For those of you who need more details, you can Google firms of endearment. And firms of endearment are organizations that actually show love. And who do they love is a very important question, because love, at the end of the day, the scriptures talk about it, that it conquers all. So if we could have that feeling of love and forgiveness, where we look at the purpose of stakeholders, there's a very simple concept that says, who are these stakeholders, which is delineated by this acronym called SPICE, S-P-I-C-E. S stands for society, which means everybody. P stands for partners, which is suppliers and distributors. I stands for investors. C stands for customers. And E stands for employees. So if every organization consciously looks at addressing all these stakeholders and ensuring on a purposeful note that they provide value, I'm sure the world would become better. As I said, there's already plenty of research on this, that organizations that are conscious about their purpose, conscious about the stakeholder value, actually create remarkable value. So whether the future will be barter, whether the future will be crypto, digital, that's a question that we leave for time to answer. But what we need to realize is we need to bring in this consciousness that we are humanity and we are together. Together, we not only survive, but together we will thrive in the future. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being part of this fascinating panel. I want to thank Mr. Uthman and Mr. Kriakos, and over to Dr. Abid for your final comment.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I really appreciate this intelligent discussion we have had. Let's not forget also that we started a program called Talents of Endearment that would lead to the development of firms of endearment, which is the gentlemen, Professor Abraham, Mr. Osman, Mr. Kriakos are all on the board of founding board of directors of this new program. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. But before we leave,